I'm John. I'm an alcoholic and a crackhead. I actually thought there would be more to start this meeting, and I wouldn't have to talk so long. But anyway, I've known Ian a long time, and we got sober. I got sober about 19 years ago here in Utah, and there's not many people still around, that I got sober with. And Ian from Utah County is one of the only people, or the only people that I see on a regular basis. This was around 14, 15 years ago. I saw Ramsey. Where's Ramsey? Right? Haven't seen him at least 12, a long ass time. And if you ever hear his story, a story about him doing meth in a box, it's a hilarious story. It was a good story. I've remembered it my whole life. And anyway, so I guess I'll just start. I did bring some notes because I do tend to wander a little bit. So basically, for me, I grew up in a non-religious family. They were a military family, and there was a code of ethics, but it wasn't like the mean code of ethics. It was the honor code of ethics. My dad wasn't mean to me or anything like that. I had a good childhood. My dad retired when I was in second grade. My brother was 10 years older than I was, and when I was 6, he was 16, and we lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And so he liked to take me places, and he was a hippie child, and he was into all the party scenes there. And even though he didn't introduce me to any of that, I always saw them having so much fun, right? I didn't see the bad side. I just saw fun. They would go swimming and just hippie stuff, I guess. I don't know. But I don't know how that played into my later choosing to do drugs and alcohol, but I did have an earlier experience where I saw it as something fun. And then he got really heavily into drugs in California, and 6 years later, my parents decided to move to Utah, so that I was 12 in sixth grade, and they thought it would be better to raise a family here and not in California. And the friends I grew up with there, they were right, because they actually didn't turn out too well. So, but I came here, and I was pretty anti-drug. I came here in 78, and I came to American Fork, Utah, and I had long hair because my brother was a hippie, and so I liked to be a hippie. Short, so short that I couldn't sit down without today being arrested. Back then they didn't care. So I didn't fit in American Fork, Utah, and I remember trying to fit in, and I remember this girl I liked, her parents asked her not to hang around with me because it wasn't LDS, and I looked like a hippie, and so I gravitated to what was called back then burnouts, and that was people that did drugs and alcohol and didn't go to church back in the late 70s, early 80s in Utah, and they were actually good people. They were really nice to me, and I didn't actually they didn't peer pressure me too much to do drugs. And so, but we had bicycle and motocross together a little bit, so we kind of did that kind of sports. And we built some friendships, and I did feel peer pressure in junior high, and so I was really still anti-drugs. I thought all dope was white, because that's what Beretta, some of you are old enough to remember Beretta, when you go find the dope guy and they'd have that white powder. I didn't actually even know what that was, right? That was just called dope. And so the way I was able to, I guess, pass with my friends that were huffing glue, huffing gas, smoking marijuana, drinking a lot, ever since sixth grade, they were always doing that. And I told them I only liked hard alcohol. And in the late 70s, early 80s, it's really hard in Utah to get hard alcohol as a child. And so I only had to drink very seldom, but when I drank, I never got to learn how to drink like a gentleman. Whenever we did anything, we did all of it. And until you throw up and you drink more, there was no learning like, here's a couple of glass of wine or anything. I had never had that in my life. I just, I smoked in second grade once. We smoked the whole pack, right? When we drank during junior high and high school, we drank every single drop, And so then, I got through high school and went off to college in Phoenix and I had, I think 1 week, and my first roommate down there, we started drinking beer, and we drank a lot of beer, and I honestly had a lot of fun, college life and beer drinking and shots and quarters and everything else it loosened up my inhibitions. There wasn't LDS people around me, and I've now learned that it wasn't the LDS people wasn't the problem. It was my ignorance they probably would have accepted me. It was probably my problem. But anyway, so I went down there. I had a lot of fun, and I remember the first time I tried cocaine. It was December 21st, 1985. So I was in school for architecture, and my first year of school, I got a job as an assistant. And then the guy that hired me got fired, and so I was like this guy that drew plans for this company. And this company in the 80s had parties, and they would have, adult parties, and it was like socially acceptable to do cocaine and do different things, right? And it's like, I saw the vice president pass doobies, I'm like, okay, well, I want to move up the corporate ladder, so I need to learn how to not throw up, and I got to learn how to drink so I don't make a fool of myself, and I can take advantage of these situations. So, but that first time I tried cocaine, I was in a bathroom, and a guy came in that was probably younger than I am now, but he seemed really old because I was 19. And he came in, he just found his wife cheating on him. And so he came in, he's all distraught, and he had this little bullet, right? And I'm like, whoa, what are you coming in here for, right? And it's like, he worked with me, so I couldn't say no. So he said, try this. Him and I stayed in that bathroom all night long. It was freaking awesome. It was awesome. But the problem is when I did leave, I was supposed to pick up my girlfriend from Burger King, right? And so I left, and they said that I appeared to be okay because I said my car knew its own way home. And so I made it halfway between that house and the Burger King, and at about 14th Street and Thomas in Phoenix, I guess I passed out. I ran into a telephone pole at 70 miles an hour, put the telephone pole through the engine, through the dashboard, into the passenger seat. I hit so hard that the back seat flew forward and broke all the latches. And all I got was what's called an ocular flap, and my nose into my face 3 centimeters, and then this cut on my neck. And so I'm a pretty lucky person because I crashed across the street from a fire department, directly across, 1 mile from Good Samaritan Hospital, and the doctor on call that night was an oculoplastic surgeon. So he did my eye, did my nose. I got a failure to avoid ticket the next day in my wallet. And I woke up, I'm like, okay, well, this is great. I need to get more cocaine because if I would have had more cocaine, I wouldn't have passed out at the wheel. It wasn't that I was an alcoholic. It was like, this cocaine stuff keeps you up, and I need to get my own. I don't want to borrow cocaine anymore. So I started having fun with cocaine in the 80s, and I honestly didn't know until I watched Narco that was like the heyday of cocaine, right? And so had a lot of fun, but it never, I would do it, and I would do all of it, but then I'd go to work. And I managed to do that for about 10 years, where I would feel so bad about doing it that I would miss 3 to 6 months, and I never gravitated to it. And then, I started drinking more and more and more, and I started drinking more to meet women. I'd go to dances and different things like that, and my drinking was definitely out of control. This is just a typical night of many, but I woke up at a Whataburger. I had placed one order, and I moved up, and I guess I passed out because the Whataburger was shut down when the cops woke me up. And they asked me, did I have cab fare? And I said, yes. Oh, they asked me what I was doing. I said that I was drinking sake shots with some Japanese clients, and I'm American, I just didn't know what I was doing. And so they asked me if I had cab fare, and so I said yes, and they said, okay, we'll park your car, and they let me go. That was my life. I got away with everything. That was not a true story. That was what I did the night before. I actually just had tequila shots at the Tapas Club that night. But I just had the gift to talk my way out of getting in trouble. And so I did get a DWI once down there, and I just pleaded no contest because My sister was up here, and she was a prosecuting attorney in Utah County, and I really didn't want my family to know I was doing drugs and alcohol, so I just pled it out and did 3 months without a license. But so I did that, 10-year career. At the 9th year of my career, I met this girl, and when I met her, she was doing this thing called methamphetamine. It was awesome, Everybody in this room knows that early on drug life is awesome, So, it was this whole other culture. Like, I worked during the day, and I had 9 years experience, and they liked me. I was married to that company, and so they gave me a lot of latitude. So, and then I had this other life at night with all these night people that didn't come out during the day, right? And we would build things and take things apart and go to parks and go to Jack in the Box and watch the sun come up, and it was like this whole, and man, it was hard to stay awake, it's just like, but I did it. And then I ended up marrying that girl, and we actually did okay. I mean, we did meet doing methamphetamine, but within about a year, my life, I had never had something take my career away so fast. I spent so much, this is a stupid meth thing, but like I used to draw plans, and then it's all computerized at this time, and I drew like love letters to my wife, so small you'd have to zoom, so that when you print it, it's just a dot. But every drawing I put out had this stuff in for my wife, flowers. I spent 24 hours just drawing something that would take me 1 hour, right? So anyway, kind of pathetic, but so we were struggling, and I was struggling at work because they hadn't seen me for about 6 months, because I'd come in weird hours and do my work and then disappear, and they were wondering what happened to me. They were also selling the company to a big national conglomerate. And so she suggested that we go to a meeting. It was an NA meeting in Phoenix. And it was, I guess, how I was probably 27, 28, 19, 20, probably 28 years old. And I went to this meeting, and I hated it. Oh, I hated that meeting. And so I asked her, I said, hey, if we can just quit doing meth, can I stop coming to these meetings? And she said, sure. And so with only 2 relapses within a year, I mean, I quit meth and went on, and we were married, and, we started building a life. We got a house, and I went to another company and started building this normal life. And then 5 years into the marriage, we had a child, awesome child, my child knows this kid right here since they're 9 years old. But at 18 months old, my wife got postpartum depression. And why she chose to turn to crack, I don't know, because that's not usually the first choice for drugs, right? But she did, and I didn't understand it because it's different than meth, right? And so I was the parent at this time. I was not doing drugs. I was I was locking her out, or I was letting her smoke in the little shed so that she doesn't go down to South Phoenix, or I would, or I'd chase her down and put my lights on the crack houses, and it was a awful time, and I just couldn't figure out how to make her quit, because it was just I'd send her to a treatment center in Santa Fe, but so I did that for about another 18 months. I'm an extremely codependent person, and I'm still codependent now, and I don't know if this is a 100% bad thing. I like being codependent with my wife, my new wife, but people probably say that's not healthy, but it makes me a little bit happy. So let me see where I was at. I forgot where I was at. Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. All right. Well, because South Phoenix is really dangerous, right? And so it was a safer place for her to smoke, and it was not coming in the house. And so anyway, so after that, we were starting to not get along very well. And so she had to tell me something at year 3. Our son was 3, and so she had smoked for a year and a half, and no, it was a year and a half. So the son was a year and a half. And so she told me she was pregnant with my neighbor's child. It was a really bad day. So because, this is where I was going with this, all my earlier acceptance, my brother showing these people have fun with drugs and alcohol, my success for 10 years of doing drugs and not really going all the way down, my success with getting off meth, I thought, you know what, I know how to make this go away. Let's go do crack, right? So within a few minutes, we're all going down there. She's excited because now I'm all in, right? And so we go do it, and instantly the hole that was ripped out of my heart was ripped out of my chest that day, right? I was really happily married in a dysfunctional way, but I was really happy with her. And so it instantly made me feel better, and so we did that, and we smoked crack for a while, and she was barely pregnant, so the child didn't make it. And then shortly after that, like 2 or 3 weeks later, we decided that we need to get sober, and we tried to get sober in Phoenix together, and it wasn't working. So I had this great idea to move to Las Vegas and get away from all these drug dealers in Phoenix. And I didn't know Las Vegas has the same thing, but 24/7 and delivery. And so it took us 2 weeks to do that, to get in trouble there. And then our marriage started falling apart, and so we kind of lived together, we didn't live together, didn't live together half a dozen times. And so now I'm kind of an addict at this point, and I'm still managing to go to work I worked at Caesar's Palace at the time. I was managing to show up, but I would stop doing drugs at 5 in the morning so that at 8 o'clock in the morning I could be straight. And I did that for 9 months. I have no idea how I could do it, because I could not do that today. But I did it, and then 9/11 happened. And so Vegas kind of shut down for construction, and went back to Phoenix, and we went back separately, and I took a job anywhere and did anything. I just kept on ending up in South Phoenix every single day, and I just couldn't do anything. It was killing me because people were trying to help me. And so after a little bit of time, I decided that there's no way I could lie to my work anymore and create revenue or do anything. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I had to confess to somebody to take care of me. And that's probably my motive, was not to quit. It was just so somebody would take care of me. So I confessed to my dad, and that was hard. And he told me to come up to Utah and go to treatment. So I came up to Utah, went to Highland Ridge. It was an IOP, and I remodeled a house for him at the same time. And so I went there so that I could get another check or somebody to support me, or just stop feeling bad. I didn't go there to actually quit, right? And so, I relapsed after the first couple of weeks, and then, when I relapsed and told the group, they asked me how many meetings I had been going to. I'm like, I don't like meetings. I went to a meeting in 1993. I'm not going back. He says, well, if you're going to be in this group, you have to freaking go to these meetings. I'm like, ugh, I hate these meetings. So I had to go to 14 meetings in a weekend, because I had to make up every meeting that I had missed in order to get back in there. And the only reason I did it is because if I didn't, my dad wouldn't fund me, or he probably would, but I felt I had a lot of pressure that I put on myself, that I wanted my dad to like what I was doing. So what he thought meant something to me. And so I went to the meetings, and I hated every one of them. There was an old church one in Provo in the basement, and everybody was smoking, and I don't know if they're smoking. They're smoking in Salt Lake, definitely, but they're all quite old and drinking coffee and talking about God, right? And that's all I heard. And I'm like, but I went to one meeting at Cirque Lodge, and there was this guy named Francis that had started the meeting. Now it's probably 30 years ago. And he shook my hand and gave me some candy and made me feel welcome there. And so I started going there, and then I did my 14 meetings. I hated them still. And I did my meetings for my group, and I graduated. But when I graduated, I moved back to Phoenix. And when I got to Phoenix, I made some deals with a drug dealer that in the phone books the new phone books for the new phone service at my house, there would be drugs in it. And so I didn't make it a day, and then in and out. I went to a number of treatment programs, a number of halfway houses, and somehow I got to a point where I was going to a job site. I stopped going to this one work, and this one work guy says, "Oh, you know what? Just tell me when you relapse, and I'll cover for you, and everything will be great." And so every Monday I'd call him, and I'd say, "I'll be in at noon." He says, "Oh, no, take a shower. No, I'll be in an hour. Take a shower, get something to eat, come in this afternoon. It'll be great." To me, that is, I have another run. And then I'm not showing up till Thursday because we get paid on Thursday. So it worked he let me do it for far too long. And, but in that work, I had to drive to a job site, and this guy was driving me as a subcontractor, and he drove me up, and in his passenger door, he had that little red AA book, right? And I'm like, "What is this?" And he says, "Oh, I'm in the 12-step program. My wife's in the 12-step program. And when she gives money out to the homeless, she gives them a book as well." I'm like, "Okay." So I don't say anything. He fed me. It was the first meal I had in a long time. So I go back to work and says, "Hey, I know somebody that could help me. He can maybe be my sponsor." I said, "But it's a conflict." He says, "No, please, we want you to show up to work. Please call this guy." So I called this gentleman. His name is Jay Parker. Still my sponsor today. But I met him probably 24 years ago, 25 years ago, and I've got 19 years sober. So he is the one person that really saw me at my worst. He's the one person that talked me into a lot of halfway houses, one person that talked me into treatment centers and put me on his couch and put me in his sober living house. He just did a lot of things, and whenever I was willing to do the work, he would help me. But then when I wasn't, and so, I went through, I had a lot of people that loved me and a lot of people that helped me that hurt me more by letting them down than just being a drug addict. And my whole drug experience was hiding it from all the people that loved me. And so I got to the point where that was so painful that I'm like, you know what? I can't live like this anymore. I've got to just be a drug addict, right? And so I went all in, right? And I just walked away from everybody, and I was losing everything anyway, and became homeless, and just, I just did what all the homeless people do in Phoenix, but I was free, I was free. I didn't have to lie to go get another check or lie to my parents that I'm going to show up for Thanksgiving or, all these things, right? It's just, that was awful for me. Let all these people down. So I did that, and I did it for a while, and I lived in a bougainvillea bush, or if I could hustle $20 other than the money for drugs, I could share a couch with a prostitute, right? I was 125 pounds walking the streets of Phoenix. I'm 210 now, right? And I was the type of person, I had only one set of clothes, my ex-wife's pants, my drug dealer's son who's locked up's shirt, my last employer's baseball cap, glasses with tape on it, and St. Vincent de Paul $6 shoes, right? That was my sole possession. That was everything I owned. And so I'm walking down the city of Phoenix, and cops would pull around and ask me if I was carrying drugs because I was profiled, because I looked like a drug addict. And so I did, but they never checked me. So, but, I finally got to a point that I felt like I was done, and I did not want to call my sponsor and tell him, because the last place he got me in, I was only there for 4 hours. I was so sick of letting people down. So I went and stood in line at Salvation Army in Phoenix, and they have a 6-month treatment program. I was not going for 6 months. I was going to 7 to 10 days until I could get into Calvary, because it was a nicer place. So, but I went in there, and I couldn't get in because I didn't know you can't get into treatment without being off of drugs. So they sent me to LARC, which is the public detox for drunks, and I went there, and then that's only 24 hours, and then I went to EVAC, which is Mesa, and I got bussed around by a sober charity that drives people around that wants to get recovery. So I go back to Salvation Army, and they let me in, right? And I met an ex-NFL player, was the general house manager, and I'm like, oh, well, if he's here, shit, man, I'll just stay here. I'm only going to stay 30 days, though. But then they took me next door and gave me clothes, used clothes, but I'd been in the same clothes for 35 solid days. And so it was really awesome to get clothes. And I wanted to remember how thankful I was for that for the rest of my life, that just to have a new set of, if I could keep that great gratitude the rest of my life, I'm going to be super happy. And for the most part, I have. And so I went through the Salvation Army. I decided after the first week that I would stay the 6 months. 3 months into my stay there, I decided I needed to leave because they don't know who I am. I have a job I can go back to, and I have my son that I can go back to, and all this stuff. But every night, my job I started on brick and brack, which is, tagging clothes, and then you work your way up, and finally I'm on the trucks, right? And so, but my last job was after this 3-month period where I think I'm going to leave, was to talk to people on the phone on why they should come into the Salvation Army. So this is my first experience with service. And so every day I would talk myself out of why I should leave, and every night, by talking them into coming in, I talked myself into staying. So I stayed the 6 months and moved into sober living after that. And then it was my sponsor, sober living, and there was one roommate. I guess it wasn't really sober living across the street, and there was a sober guy and me in the house across the street from there, but we still did sober living stuff. And so I did that for 2.5 months, and I had a job right out of Salvation Army. And my son was in Tiger Scouts, and when he was in Tiger Scouts, I couldn't go to Tiger Scouts because my sponsor has these rigid meetings. Monday's Razor's Edge, Tuesday is Salvation Army, Wednesday, it's 48. So he has this, and I have to go because he's got these disciples, right? And we all go together to every single meeting. And so now that I have 6 months plus 2, I have 8.5 months sober. I got him to trust me a little bit, and he said I could go to Tiger Scouts. So most people said that'd be a pretty good idea. But so now I have my sponsor thinking I'm going to Scouts, and I don't have to go to the meeting tonight. I have my ex-wife and mother-in-law thinking that I'm going to a meeting. So I don't go to Scouts. I go smoke crack, right? That's a perfect example to me, right? And it wasn't a week before I lived at shared the same couch with that same, maybe a different prostitute. I actually don't know, but same crack house. But it wasn't successful trying to smoke crack again, and I was back in the same place, and I was at this place called The Solution after trying to get clean, and I was trying to get in there, but I called my sister for some reason, and my sister, during this whole drug addiction thing, my father had passed one time, and that's a whole different story. That I used him being in the hospital to go for an excuse to leave work to go smoke crack, and he ended up dying, and. But, I was at Solution, and I called my sister, and my sister said, you need to do something. You need to get something. Well, I'm going to go to the Solution. He says, really? He says, yeah, why don't you come up to Utah and be of service to your mother? I'm like, well, I got to be with my son. He says, how much have you seen your son in the past 3 months? I'm like, not at all. He says, why don't you come up here? So I didn't have another excuse, and so I decided to come to Utah, and from that previous experience, I knew that Francis would be at that one meeting. So I went to that meeting, and I actually didn't do a treatment center. I just went to that meeting, and I used Utah and me not knowing anybody really in Utah for drugs and alcohol, that kind of drugs anyway, as my sobriety program. And it lasted 3 months, and then I met this girl from high school, and I told her my elongated story, 6 hours at a Chili's. And she told me that I was not an alcoholic. I was a drug addict. So we decided to drink, and I proceeded to show her that I actually was an alcoholic. Right? I drink a lot, and I drink fast, and I had got out of practice, but I got up to speed quickly again, and then she ended up going away shortly after, like a month later, and now I'm drinking alone in Salt Lake City, and I'm like, I need to do drugs too. And when I made that decision, it only took me 5 minutes to find someone on the street. And within the first day, I've hucked my jacket, my DeWalt drills. I've done empty deposits, if you know what those are. And I've because I can't go home. So I got to generate. I didn't know I was going to relapse. So I had to generate revenue as fast as I could. And, the first night I stayed in a nice hotel. And the third night I stayed at the Alta, So I don't know what it was about Salt Lake, but Salt Lake didn't treat me nicely. My first wife was Puerto Rican black, and so by me bailing her out for a year and a half, I had somewhat of an acceptance in South Phoenix. And in Salt Lake, the minorities that were trying to sell me drugs did not trust me, and they just screwed me over, and I don't know, some Polynesian gang thing. I ended up renting them my truck for drugs so they could make deliveries because they didn't have a car, and that way I could get better drugs. I had done that in the past with a rental car with a drug dealer in Phoenix. That I rented him a Camry, and he was nicknamed the Solo Bandit. He robbed 39 check cashing places and then ended up dead in a high-speed dispute. That was my friends down in Phoenix in the drug scene. So I thought I could get him a concrete job. I really thought I was going to help him. But I always was very optimistic, and that didn't serve me well in that thing, that we're just doing this, and I remember taking stuff from my mother, but it was for the right reason, because I need to get done. And the faster I can get done, the sooner I can get back and be of service to them and be a useful member. So it's justified that I steal her wallet, or justified that I cash checks and all that stuff. But anyway, I got through. So I'd been through the Salvation Army. I had recovery. I had seen some success with some step work. And I got to a point where I owned my truck outright. It wasn't a lot. It was $3,500, right? But I could pawn it, right? And I could go get more drugs. But at this point, I decided I did not want to go back. I told my sponsor, if you go back to Salvation Army again, it's 9 months. That was a long-ass time. And so I called my sponsor somewhere from West Salt Lake, from some Burger King, from a payphone. I had change in my truck, and he answered. And 679-4745 is his old phone number. Memorize that. 528-1030 is my old drug dealer's number. So if I ever get in trouble, I do know him. But I called him, and he said, okay, you know what? You've been going in and out of this thing for 3 or 4 years now. You're kind of pathetic, right? And I'm just going to tell you what it is. You're up there, but you need to get a temporary sponsor up here. But, yeah, call me. And this is what you're going to do. If you're going to ever call me again, you're never allowed to say, yeah, but to me. Yeah, but I have scouts. Yeah, but I have a bid tomorrow. Yeah, I have work. Anything in recovery, I have to do it. And I guess I use a lot of percentages, and so he jokingly said I can't say percentages to him anymore either. And he had all these other rules. I actually had to read the big book. I've been through Salvation Army. I've done a lot of stuff. I never actually read the big book. I said I did. I did steps 1, 2, and 3 in every treatment center. 1, 2, 3, the packets, and they're awesome. And but so he didn't believe me, so he made me rewrite the AA book. And instead of just changing alcohol for cocaine, because he knew I'd just skip the words down there, and then everywhere I saw alcohol, I'd change it. I wouldn't actually read it. So he made me change the tense, like drink for hit, just like the whole thing. And I had to highlight everything. And I freaking read that book, and that was the first time I read it. I've stayed sober ever since, but at this time, down in Phoenix and some other things, I didn't like who I was, and at this point, I had no other solution than to just do this program. And there was points like, I didn't think of ever taking my life, except for once when my sister said something rude to me on a phone, and there was a bus, and I really came close to stepping in front of that bus, but I had $10 in my pocket, so I went to the crack house instead. But I did reckless things, like I drove 100 miles an hour for 137 miles with $40 on a donut, with no brakes, just the emergency brake, right, on a car, to get crack to drive from Phoenix to Prescott back and forth. I did that every night. And every night I would think that it would be different, and it just never was. But so when I started working the program with 12 steps, legitimately, and I read the big book, my life started to change, and I remember that when I heard the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, I sat on the front row. I just paid attention, right? Because I didn't have another option. I'd already burnt out every bridge I already had. I'd been to so many treatment centers, so many, it just was pathetic. And, I see people coming in and out of the rooms now, and I'm like, God, they're not as pathetic as I was. I was literally, I would be high in the meeting. I would be high in the parking lot after the meeting or before the meeting. I just, lying the whole time. I was just not here. And so this time, I applied myself 100%, yeah. So, and every single word that was said was life or death for me, because whether I died of a heart attack or something like that, I wouldn't want to live, right? I did not want to live how I was living. And so once I started doing that, I started working the steps, my life started getting better. And, I remember that what my sponsor did in Phoenix, I tried to do here. So he had a group of men. And so he also was part of the entertainment committee. So I went and joined the entertainment committee so I would get to know people. And I'd go to set up all the dances and all the different things. And I did get to know a lot of people. Some of them are still around today. And then there's this group meeting in this sober house in Draper. I don't know if anybody knows Rob Butner. It was his house. And he ran this sober living house unofficially, right? But there was some people all the people running meetings were actually living in his house, and so I started going there. I never lived there, but I went there 4 to 5 nights a week. I would have my meetings. I did my 90 and 90, and so I'd have my first meeting, and if something happened there, I'd have it in my wallet. So I didn't ever have to look for a meeting because they didn't have the internet back then, right? So I didn't want to have an excuse not to go to a meeting. So I had this list of the meetings in my wallet, and if all else failed for some reason, Rob's meeting was at 10 o'clock at night, and I could always go there. So I double-dipped a lot of meetings and stayed there 3 or 4 years. Met a lot of good people there. Most people only live there 6 months to a year, but I just stayed. And but I did my steps, and 8.5 months sober, a person asked me to be a sponsor. And so I said, I don't know. I'm not allowed to say yes or no. I have to call my sponsor. Because I'm all into this 12-step thing at this point. Like, it's my life or death. And so I don't make my own decisions in recovery. So I call my sponsor, and he says yes. He's like, okay, shit. So I had to go back and reread the big book again, right? And now I'm like, I feel responsible. So, like, I'm studying ahead of meeting with him so I don't look like an idiot. And so I'm learning the 12 steps far better than I did it myself, right? And I'm really focused on it, and so I get him through the steps, and then we get to step 10 and 11. I had to hold him off because I actually wasn't done with that step yet with my sponsor, so I never have told him that. Ian's heard it before, but that person is gone. I don't really talk to him that much anymore, so he doesn't know he didn't do the 11th step or the 10th step because I wasn't done yet. So, but I did that, and then I started sponsoring a lot of people, and I started meeting a lot of people in recovery, was highly involved in service, and helped promote another fellowship because my sponsor's fellowship is another fellowship. And, I met a lot of people. Ian, year 4 or 5 probably, right, sober. We had a good group. We'd go to meetings. We'd go to eat afterwards, and there was a big group of us. And it was awesome, and sponsored a lot of people, My sponsor told me I could never say no. And that's why I'm speaking tonight, because I can't say no. I don't like to come do this stuff, but I can't say no. And so I had 39 sponsees at one time. That was the most I had. But it was really easy because you give them assignments and you only have 5. So people said, how can you take that many? And I'm like, because you just give them step 1 and they're not calling you. Like the last 2 I've given it in the past 2 months, they haven't done it. They're all gung-ho. I even drop it off at their work, right? Last he shows up to our meetings. So it was really easy. So there was only, the maximum there ever was that was actually serious was like 8 to 10, right? And so, but what I did was I did that for about the first 7 to 10 years of recovery. And because I am continually trying to figure out how to go smoke crack, right? And so doing step 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, with these people over and over and over again. I went to a lot of newcomer meetings. That's what I needed to hear for a long time, because I am continually trying to tell myself how I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be somewhere else. And by me working with other people, just like that first phone call at the Salvation Armies, I'm talking myself, this is where I need to be, shit. I mean, there are not many people that, with my years of sobriety, that still looks in convenience stores to see if they sell Brillo, just to make sure there's an option. I was in some little city in Colorado 2 weeks ago. Had to go look at that convenience store. They did not. 946 people in there. There's no single chore boy in there. So, Austin, Texas, there is. But I don't know why that's still in me. I mean, I've done recovery for a while, but it's like, I remember that it took me 10 years to stop dreaming about a cold bottle of beer with a label, in an ice thing with a label, and then the first crack, and like, I visualize a lot of stuff. So, like, just that whole thing, it took me 10 years to stop obsessing about that. So, I don't think I'll ever stop obsessing about this other stuff. If I could figure a way to do the drug and have whatever pleasure without any ramifications, who knows? You know, I'm asking people, myself right now, is like, my last breath, do I want to go out with 40 or 50 years sobriety, or do I want just one last hit? All right? I don't know how it's going to play out, honestly. I know it'd be a shame to give up my whatever, right? But man, it would feel good. But so step work and stuff like that. I mean, when I worked the steps, my sponsor, I personally think my sponsor is the best sponsor in the world. But he pointed out some things to me. And like when I did my 4-step, he pointed out it's vigorous, right? He pointed out all these words, like where they say when you look at your 5th proposal, when you do your 5th step, have you laid your cement and mortar and all that other stuff? It says the same thing 4 or 5 different ways. So he pointed out to me, they wouldn't say it 4 or 5 different ways if it wasn't true. You have to go back and make sure you did that stuff right. And me at this time, this is life and death again for me. So I was really concerned, so I had to make sure I did it. And then when I did my 4-step, I did every single thing. My first resentment was in preschool. It was kindergarten maybe. We were moving back. My dad was in the military, so we were moving back from Japan. I have a very good memory. And so my brother sold my swing set, but he was too lazy to get the slide, so I only got $10, not $15. So I resent him because he didn't get my full money. So I had 157 items on my list, and my ex-wife was one of them, but there's like 100 just on that alone. But it's just like I paraphrased them just to make them simpler. And I did that. I gave it everything I gave, and then at the time I did my 5th step with my sponsor, and we worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was awesome. And I gave it to him, and I shared all these dark secrets, and he shared some dark secrets. And I'm like, oh my God, if my ex-wife went and told all the shit I did, I would have one friend and his 7 friends, right? So I actually felt free. I felt like, okay, you know what? If the worst comes out about me, I still have my sponsor. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And that was freeing. And I worked through the steps, I got the way to deal with life through the 12 Steps Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't have any schools that taught me how to get through life. And then I also got my spiritual connection to a higher power through 12 steps. I wasn't raised with any religion, so I have no background, and so my concept of God was twisted in a good way, but it was a little egotistical. I felt like if I acknowledged a higher power, that how could I own 3 watches? And I know there's a starving kid in the neighborhood. If I don't give them food, Jesus is going to crucify me, right? So I just felt like, and so my sponsor was, like I said, he's the best sponsor. He was creative. He says, He says, hey, John, what's God's will for me? I sponsor some people. I have a sober house. I employ people that frequently steal my van, and I sponsor you. I'm like, oh my God, you're doing God's will. I know you are, because you're saving my life. I know God wants you to do this. He says, He says, what kind of ego do you have that I'm okay providing for my family? I'm okay going to work, and you have to sell everything and go save the world. You're pretty egotistical. So that was the start. That was the spark of, oh, wow, okay, I can have a belief in a higher power, right? So I tried to force it, right? I got out the Bible, never read it before, read 2 pages, found 3 mistakes. I was told that I was not ready to read the Bible, and maybe I just need to start praying a little bit. And through this, I forgot about that. So through the 12 steps, I also learned how to pray, and it's the traditional way, throw the keys underneath there. I was supposed to memorize the 3rd step prayer. I had to teach these Hispanic guys this prayer at the same time, so I made it more simple. But when I first did the 3rd step prayer, that was before I did my 4th step with my sponsor later on. But my experience with it was I was not going to see my son until I got out of Salvation Army. So I had early success on the 3rd step prayer. And this guy came in and told us to do, I did a packet at Salvation Army, packet 1, packet 2, steps. And 3rd step, this guy comes in and he says, hey, I want you to memorize the 3rd step prayer. I want you to say it day and night, and we'll meet next week. And I'm like, I don't think that's good enough. Right? I did it because I was trying to do anything, but I also made my own packet. So I made my own question and answer packet because I've done so many of them. But I did it. And the day before I met with this guy, they were telling me that I wouldn't see my son until after I graduated, which was like 6 months later, 5 months later. And then I did 3 days of the prayer. And then my ex-mother-in-law made arrangements, got into the confidential program that I could get passes every other weekend to go see my son. So I was like scared straight, like this 3rd step prayer really, really works, right? This is awesome. And so I started believing in that. And then when I sponsored people, I only half believed it because now it's years later, right? But I said it like I believed it. And then they had like burning bushes and stuff happened. I'm like, oh, so it kept on building and building and building. And so, I still say my 3rd step prayer, my 7th step prayer, my 11th step prayer, other stuff I add into it and stuff on a daily basis. And my life continues to get better. So now, with recovery, I've met a lot of good people, but what is my life like now in 5 minutes? My sponsor had one thing that I wanted, and that was peace and serenity in his life. He really was centered, and he was doing a lot of stuff. He did a lot of stuff, right? But he just always seemed so calm, and I was hyped up. And so I just wanted his peace, and I'm still a little hyped up, but I'm far more peaceful and I'm hoping that I'm following his footsteps, that I'm calm and I can sit and listen to people and stuff. And my sponsors, I think, just celebrated 26 years sober, which is surprising to me because I thought he only had 24. Because I thought he was only like 4 years ahead of me, but actually I forgot I relapsed for 2 years in between there. So anyway, but my life today, I'm still in service. I'm helping with a meeting. My program is different today than it was the first 5 to 10 years. But what is not changed is my willingness. I'm willing to go to a 12-step meeting and do every suggestion, every hour of every day, if that's what it took for me to stay sober. When I sponsored people a certain way, and then this Rob Butner's sponsor, this guy named Kim, had 35 years, sponsored a whole different way. And what I found was Kim's people stayed sober, and the people that my sponsor sponsored stayed people, 2 different methods. But what was the common thing? It was willingness. If you're willing to do whatever it takes on a daily basis, and for me, that's a spiritual connection to a higher power and an active program in a 12-step program. That gives me a backup plan. So when I'm pissed off at God, I have AA. When I pissed off at AA, I have God. So I have kind of a backup plan. If I have those active in my life on a daily basis, I've managed to stay sober, and progress and see other people progress. I can't believe Ian's 14 years. 15, yeah. It's just so weird because he will say the same thing. Does it seem like it was last year? Time is like, you guys, I remember people getting up with a lot of time and saying some stuff, right? It's like, it is nothing to me. I remember walking in and getting my newcomer chip at Cirque, my 30 I remember the speeches. I'm like, I'm going to do, this is the first time, I get up and I'm really good at 30, 60, 90. So at 6 months, I'm going to do exactly what I did the first 30 days of sobriety. And I said that for the first 5 years at Cirque. It's like, I'm going to just do exactly what I did for the first 30 days because that kept me sober. And so anyway, let me see if I kind of didn't look at this at all. I can't even read it. 12 steps. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I'm if I have anything to say, it's if everybody out here has sponsors, or get a sponsor, work the 12 steps. I didn't do that for years. There's probably other programs out there. This one's free. It works. It's worked for a long time. It's worked for a lot of people. And once I surrendered on that phone call, the program is super easy to me. I don't work it at all. It just is who I am. It's what my sponsor had. It was effortless for him, because it's not like, oh, I have to go do this, or I have to do this. It just is. And once it just is, it's super easy. It's just my life, and oh, one more thing. So if you apply these principles in work, amazing things happen, right? When the recession happened, all these normie people, and we were all losing our jobs and everything, the 12-step principles I could share with those people helped them all, because they just don't have these tools that the 12 steps has. And so I kind of run my work through the 12 steps seamlessly, and you provide the same principles, and it's worked really, really well. And that's kind of, it's how I live my life today. It's simple. It's as honest as I can be. I screw up every single day. I still lie probably every day. But I'm working on it, and I learn something every day. Like this, what did I learn? That's what I wrote here. I learned something in every meeting. Like, I learned how to communicate with my wife better. I haven't applied it yet, but I've learned. This is just 2 nights ago, right? I learned that I am really good at listening to someone and not saying anything. And I am really good at interrupting people. I'm not so good at listening and just adding a little bit of input. And that's what my wife wants. I either take over the conversation or I don't say anything. And somewhere in the middle is what that she wants. And so I know, and I never saw that because I didn't understand. I'm like, I'm listening. I mean, do I have to? So anyway, I still learn things today, and I learned also that because I wasn't raised with religion, that I had been telling people God of their understanding, all this stuff for a lot of people. And I had the sponsee that I met through Ian's treatment center. Well, I didn't meet him through, I knew him. Oh, that's 2 things. Okay, so anyway, there's a lot of people that have a problem with the word God, right? God never meant anything negative or positive for me, so it doesn't mean anything. So I was sponsoring all these people and saying God and stuff. I didn't know it was like chalkboards for some of them. So I got an awareness about a month ago that God may not be the friendly word to everybody. So I learned that, and then I met this sponsee of mine 8 years ago, probably. Mason's got 8 or 9 years now, right? And so I said one thing to him. He was in treatment. I don't remember saying it, but he shared at his first year meeting when he got his first chip this statement. And the statement was, I told him when I went and met with him that if there was anybody in his treatment center that was working the program harder than him, that was who's going to stay sober, not him. Because if you look at your groups, you look at the stuff, not many of the people stick around, and so he took it to heart, man. He freaking excelled. And so I don't even remember saying it to him, but I guess I said to him, so if you're in a treatment center, if there's somebody working the 12-step program better than you, they're probably the one, because it's about 1 out of every group. Okay, with that, I'll take another 24.